We're on Chapter 6, Earnings and Leave, on page 10 in the Payroll Training Manual. We're going to go to Payroll, Maintenance, Earnings and Leave. We're still setting up the foundation of the payroll software, and notice that we give you all of the preset items you see listed here. There are 15 preset earnings and leave items in the payroll software. Some of them you won't use, some of them you'll need more than one. Notice that each type has a number, and you would be able to edit the first example, let's say for per item wages. If you have more than one per item wage type, you can edit the first one, give it a specific name, save that, and then add a second by clicking the Add button. We're going to use the exercise on page 10 and in 11 to edit the existing earning. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. We are going to add. For our exercise on page 11, we're going to add a new item. So in our sample township, we have two types of overtime wages. You're going to look at your policies to determine what you need to set up. This is just an example, but think about what you do. If your policy states that overtime is paid at time and a half, but if the road guy has to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and remove a tree from across the road, and you have something called emergency call-in overtime that's at a rate of 2 times instead of time and a half, then you would need a second overtime rate. So think about your policies. If you have separate items that need to be added to this base, you would add them before you start adding employees. So we're going to create the foundation for all the things that are needed by all the employees based on our policies. So to add the new item on page 11, we would click the Add button. And we're going to give that a name because it's an overtime. I don't want to confuse it with the regular overtime. I'm going to call this one Emergency Call Overtime because that's what my policy calls it. I have to give it a type, and from the drop-down list, this is an overtime wage. Type 3000, and it gives it 3001 as the next number. If you're an OP and FPF member, you would need to put the OP and FPF type in this box, and that would be for this instance only overtime pay. You would consult with OP&F if you weren't sure. And our rate per our policy for emergency call overtime is 2 times the base rate of pay. So we'll enter 2 there. And then click Save and Close. So you can see in our list that the different types are listed together, and I now have the 3000, which is the regular overtime wages, and the 3001, which is the overtime paid at emergency call rate. You can see to the right the overtime rate for each one. So I'm not going to accidentally pay emergency call overtime. So again, look down that list and you can see one of each type listed, and you may not use them now, but you may need them later. For our example of editing the existing earnings, on your book on page 11 it says very clearly, if you have OP and FPF employees, you must edit all of the earnings and leave to insert the OP and FPF type. If you don't have OP and FPF employees, you don't need to enter the OP and FPF type. That is only for Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund members. So in our example, we're going to pretend that we are Ohio Police and Fire Pension Fund members. We can mark items, more than one item at a time, to edit them. And I've reviewed my list of earnings and leave, and I know what I need to add to my foundation. So on page 11, we're going to mark the per item wages, the comp time, the vacation leave, and the other leave. You're going to be editing the ones that you need. We're just using examples of things. Go ahead, we'll click Edit, and the Edit Earning or Leave form opens to the very first one alphabetically. Well, it's actually by type, the 4000 per item wages. So if I'm going to use per item wages according to my policy, I'm not going to let it say per item wages. In our example, we have a zoning inspector that for every time he turns in a zoning permit, he gets a set amount for each permit he turns in. So it's a per item wage. Every time he turns in a zoning permit, he gets $15. He's not an OP and FPF employee, so I don't have to worry about the OP and FPF type. Notice at the bottom left, you see the navigation bar. It shows me clearly that I'm editing one of 4 items. When you're editing multiple items, when you click Save, the software will automatically advance you to the next one in the list. And it shows you that it saved the zoning permits in the bottom left corner. So now I'm on comp time. And for comp time, you have to consult your policy. So comp time in our example is used by the OP and FPF members, and the first thing we're going to do is give that the OP and FPF type. And for our sample, it's going to be 0. When they're paid for comp time, it's as if they were regular pay. It's included in the base. That's just an example for our use. Notice the comp time accrual rate. You need to consult your policies. Some people have employees that receive 1 straight time as comp time. Some policies state that when you work overtime, you can be paid out at time and a half or take comp time later at time and a half. So if we're going to, our policy states we earn comp time at 1.5. So I'm going to change that to match my policies. If you have comp time rates at regular 1.0 and a different group of employees use the 1.5, you would want to edit the name so that it would have a specific name, comp time 1.0, and then you can add a second comp time at 1.5. Give it a specific name so you don't confuse the two. We only have 1 rate in our sample township. We'll go ahead and notice that it's credited manually. Many of you might have leave balance limits. You can complete those here. There is a maximum leave balance, which means the software won't let you earn, it won't let you have more than this amount in your balance at once. If your limit is 10 hours and a person turns in 12 hours, then it's going to deny the extra hours over the limit. So look at your policies. If your policies contain a limit for the maximum leave balance, then you would place them in like Bob has shown you here. If you don't have a limit, leave it marked do not limit the leave balance. There's also the maximum annual accrual. So your policy might also state as a different item that a person is not allowed to accrue more than a certain number of hours a year. So if your policy states that, you would limit the hours that the whole total hours they're allowed to have in a year, and the software would not let them earn that in a year. If you don't have those limits, leave them marked do not limit annual accrual. On the bottom left corner, most of you won't use this setting. It'll be left at the default where it is now, and it shows marked in the checkbox, using this leave accrues all prorated leaves. Your policies are going to state whether that's correct. So what that means is when an employee takes comp time, it replaces his regular hours, and he's still going to accrue toward his sick and vacation. If your policies don't state that, you would uncheck this box, but it would be specifically stated or not stated. Pay attention to your policies. In our policy, it is included, so we'll leave that setting and click Save. The software will advance us to the next earning and leave, and vacation leave is what we see here. For OP and FPF purposes, we would have to put our type, and for this example, it is 0. It replaces the regular pay in their base hours. Notice that vacation leave automatically defaults to the leave type vacation. In our sample township, vacation leave is accrued per pay period. So the default where it shows this leave is earned per pay period is correct for us, and our employees accrue 3.1 hours per pay period. So Bob's going to enter 3.1 hours. Now, if those of you that have leave that gets dumped in on an anniversary date, you would mark this leave is credited manually. That means it's not going to accrue per pay period, but once a year, as established by your policies, you're going to adjust in the amount of leave he is supposed to have for vacation. More Complicated entities earn leave per hours worked, and if that's what your policy says, you're going to enter those boxes. How many hours per hours worked? For our sample, again, it is 3.10 hours. If your policy states that a new employee accrues at 3.10 hours, but once they reach a benchmark of like 5 years or 10 years, they accrue a higher balance, you would want to set the vacation leave for everybody at the accrual rate of a brand new employee, so that that's what's pulled into the new employee wizard. For those employees, when they hit the benchmark, you would edit their employee setup to change that accrual rate. And for our purposes, though, you would have one vacation leave. When it's attached to the employee, the correct accrual rate is set. Again, you have the maximum leave balances, the maximum accrual, and in the bottom left corner, include in regular hours. And whether or not this is accruing all prorated leaves, that's going to be up to your policy, and you would use that as you needed. Go ahead and click Save. And we're using the other leave default to match our policy. We have one more leave in our policies that we need to add, and it's called bereavement leave. So you may also have a leave that when a family member, a close family member, passes away, you grant some paid leave to your employees. If so, you would want a bereavement or a funeral leave added, and you could use the default other leave setting for that, or if it's already been used, click Add to add another type. Well, if your OP and FPF employees will use this, you would put the type, and that would be 0 in our situation. Check it for yourself. Nobody ever accrues bereavement leave, so we'd be marking that when this leave is credited manually. When a person has the death in the family that matches what your policy states you grant, you would earn and pay that at the same time. You may have maximum balances, maximum annual. If your policy states that there are maximum balances, you would enter those here. But the pay stub printing area, where it says hide on stub if no activity and 0 balance, this is really nice for the bereavement leave, to check that box. And that way, when someone has a death in the family, it's only going to appear on that one pay stub, and then the rest of the year they're not going to be seeing that. So it will hide it on the stub if there's no activity or a 0 balance. And then that's all 4 that we needed to edit. We can save and close. And remember that if you're an OP and FPF employer, you would edit all of these, give them an OP and FPF type, and save those so that these items are going to pull into the monthly report correctly. That brings us to page 12. If we want a report of our earnings and leave, we're going to find that in payroll and reports and statements. So you can close the earnings and leave form, go to reports and statements, and again, the foundation of our payroll and the reports that go with those foundation items are going to be found under entity reports. When you click on the entity reports, it opens up to show you the earnings report. You click on that and it'll show you a list of all of your earnings, and you could print a report if you like. And that's it for Chapter 6.